Westborough has witnessed great changes since it became the 100th town in 1717. 285 years ago, it was a small farming village. Today, it is a modern town with 18,000 residents. People of Westborough, old and new, share the same heritage. Though Westborough came into existence in 1717, its history dates back to prehistorical times. Artifacts found near Cedar Swamp, Lake Hockomock, and the Chauncey Lake indicate prehistorical men were present in the area.
And we have been able to document in the archaeology that we have done all the way back to 9,200 BC, 9,200. And at Charlestown Meadows, for instance, there were two levels. One was 7,400 years ago, and the other one was 3,400 years ago. That is in the area where Mill Pond, the new elementary school, is being built. How far back into prehistory we had. They didn't call them Native Americans, they were Indians. They were Paleo-Indians, they were woodland Indians. Because we had so many brooks and streams and ponds and high ground, and these were gatherers and herders. They were not what you and I think of as the Plains Indians who came down on the hill, this was a whole different, they didn't really have settlements. They would settle, for instance, in one area of town called Charlestown Meadows, and then they would move with the herds and the fishing down to the Cape.
Westborough's easy access to headwaters of Assabet and the Sudbury rivers played an important role in attracting Native Americans.
The Native Americans would follow the headwaters, follow the Sudbury River and the Assabet River to the headwaters in Westborough. And here they would hunt and they would look for quartzite. So therefore, before there was written history, people were coming to Westborough as a major location.
According to folklore, Jack Straw, the Westborough Indian, was taken to England by Sir Walter Raleigh, for whom he served as a guide and interpreter. Upon returning to New England, Jack Straw was granted 300-acre land in Westborough, known as the Jack Straw Hill. Jack Straw, the name has become a legend in our town's history. Native Americans came to Westborough not only by rivers, but also by land.
The old Connecticut path was one of the first paths that Native Americans used to go into the interior of New England. And that passed through Westborough and went around Fay Mountain. And they followed that. And again, when the white settlers, the English settlers came, they followed the old Connecticut path leading through Westborough.
In the mid-1600s, early settlers such as David Warren, Eli Whitney, and the Fay family built their homes along the path. Chauncey Lake holds a special place in Westborough history. The first town meeting was held at a house on Powder Hill near the lake. In 1659, a Massachusetts General Court granted the lake and adjacent 500-acre land to Reverend Charles Chauncey. Reverend Charles Chauncey was the minister to the Pilgrims at Plymouth for 3 years. Later, preached at Scituate for 13 years. He became the second president of the Harvard College in 1654. though he never settled in Westborough. The lake and the street nearby bear his name. The 178-acre Chauncey Lake and the beach became town's property in 1969. Supervised by the Park and Recreation Commission, it is the place where residents go fishing, swimming, and boating. Westborough started as a farming village.
When Westborough first was settled, actually the date is 1770, it became a 100th town, but people had been here since the mid-1600s. And our first town was established as Wessonville over on Route 9. The church was there, the homes were there, and of course it was farmland. It was nothing for a grant from the king to be 900 acres, 500 acres, and they would come and settle, bring up their children.
In the 1860s, the town boasted 184 dairy farms. There were also farms that produced Indian corn, potatoes, eggs, cereals, butter, and milk. Mr. Robert Harvey was born in 1919 on his parents' cattle farm. He fondly remembers the early years.
My brother and I were brought up to get up in the morning and help with the chores. At that time of our growing up, my father would milk the cows the first thing in the morning and put the milk in jugs and take it up to the center of Westborough to catch the early milk train into Boston. So he had to have his milk up there at a certain time every morning. I used to love to ride uptown with him when he took the milk up to the milk plant, up to the milk station. But the only thing is, when we got back home, we always had a lot of hard work to do. Dairying was a profitable business, but it was also a lot of labor involved in it. You had to milk the cows, you had to feed the cows, you had to clean the barns out, you had to raise the crops, hay and corn to feed the cows. There was always a lot of work to do.
Mr. Frank Poskett, born in 1908, also has vivid memories of his life on the farm.
And as a farm boy, of course, I had chores to do. My job was to feed the chickens in the morning. I had to go, if the cows during the summer, I had to go to the pasture, round up the cattle, drive them home for my dad, help with the chores, help to do the milking, feeding the cattle. It was all a day-to-day operation from 5 o'clock in the morning till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. 7 days a week, 30 days a month, 365 days of a year. I well remember on the farm we never had a vacation. My father and mother never took a vacation, and I never took a vacation. You couldn't go on a vacation. You had to milk the cows every night and every morning. You had to be there. So therefore, to be able to go away for a weekend was something I never experienced until I had sold the farm back in 1960.
Though farming was hard, the memories of simple farm life are sweet.
The thing that I liked about the old days was everybody knew everybody else. You knew your neighbors, you knew the people on the farm.
you didn't have contracts that you signed to be sure that everybody did what they were supposed to. People trusted people in those days. We didn't lock our doors in our house for many, many years without locking our doors. Today, I don't think you'd like to do that very much. You'd lock your door every night and you wouldn't trust anybody unless you had it in writing.
There are few farms in town today. Harvey Farm mainly produces vegetables. The Nurse Farm also offers many kinds of farm produce. Most of the farmland has changed into new houses, hotels, office buildings, and high-tech industries. Early industries also became prosperous.
Slowly but surely, as progress needed it, we began to be an industrial. And the first of that was what was known as a cottage industry. And what's a cottage industry? It meant that they would do it in their homes. They would make the sleighs in the carriage house. They would make the hats in their parlor. They would, the boots and shoes. So often the women would take some, and the men would take some of the lasts as we know them, and I think you're all familiar with that term. And then they would take them home and get them to a certain point, and then they began to have factories. And then the stores were built downtown that you can still see today. 1871, 1882, along the commercial, we call them Renaissance Revival, and the storefronts propped up, and all sorts of things from pickles to nails to handkerchiefs to slates for the children to write on, where we made more sleighs than we had people, and we sent them as far west as Wisconsin. We also shipped them to England.
Sleigh manufacturing became big business in town. At its peak, as many as 3,000 to 4,000 sleighs were made annually. Baxter and Daniel Forbes, Levi Bowman, Corning Fairbanks, and William Sibley were among early sleigh makers in town. Besides sleigh making, there was the straw hat industry of the 1900s. The National Store Works, owned by Henry Bernard and George Smalley, was built in 1871 at the present site of the Forbes Municipal Building. It was destroyed by a fire in 1917. To make straw hats, winter rye were collected in June. They were soaked, then cut into sections. Later, straw was cured by the brimstone fire and bleached. Finally, the prepared straw was split, ready for braiding. Women and children were straw hats makers. Bessie Fay, mother of Eli Whitney, started her own straw hat business and was quite successful. Another early industry was the boots and shoes. Westborough Weaving Company was founded in 1902. It made narrow fabrics. In 1929, the company moved to South Carolina. Both farming and the early industries benefited from the Boston-Worcester Railroad, also known as the Iron Horse. It came to town in 1834. In 1899, the train depot at East Main Street was built to meet the demands of the growing passenger and freight train service. The schools underwent tremendous changes too. In the 1700s, a teacher was required for all towns with more than 50 homes. The first school district was established in 1795.